Welcome to the Freeman's Podcast. I'm your host, Joel Whitmire. Join us as we explore liberty, truth, and current events from a biblical worldview. What's up, Andrew? How are you?
Dude, I'm great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. It's great having you back. We haven't done a one-on-one in a little while, so I'm excited.
It's good to be back. Good to be in this room. Good to be at that small rectangle table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I love coming up with icebreaker questions.
Yeah.
And I've never asked you this question before, but
Wow.
your favorite American war movie.
Okay. That's super easy. The Patriot.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's my favorite. Now, it's not completely historically accurate.
Mel Gibson wasn't in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing there. No, it's what they did for Mel Gibson's character is they blended 2 to 3 real people.
Okay.
And made him one. So you had Francis Marion, who was the Swamp Fox. So that's where
What a great name.
Yes.
Gosh.
That is where you get the idea in the movie where they're like hiding out in the swamps and stuff. There was a real guy who did that, who harassed the British forces.
Okay.
And really was a thorn in the side of Cornwallis.
Okay.
So you have him. Then he kind of takes on Daniel Morgan's, who was a general.
Okay. Is that where they get Captain Morgan, like the rum?
No.
Okay.
This is actually this is where a lot of the Morgan counties in the South come from. Is this guy?
Okay.
He's a really cool guy. He led I think it was a brigade, maybe a regiment of sharpshooters.
Okay.
Which were some of the first rifles in existence.
Wow.
The British muskets had smoothbores. And so they're very inaccurate versus the frontiersmen who had these rifles. They put the spiral in it, which made them much more accurate.
Okay.
So you have him.
So Swamp Fox, Daniel Morgan.
And I'm trying to remember the other guy, but it is basically the blending of the three. Daniel Morgan, fun fact with him, he's the only officer of George Washington's that George Washington let him use his first name.
Wow.
He just turned a blind eye to it and just accepted it. So cool there. But yeah, I love the story. It does portray what life was like, what the warfare was like pretty well.
Yeah.
And it just gets me fired up, like America.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mine's another Mel Gibson movie. We talked about it right before this, but We Were Soldiers.
I love that movie.
Mel, I just think crushes it as a dad, as a leader.
Yeah.
There's that scene when he's in the chapel praying with his men.
Yep.
Or one of his men.
His lieutenant, yeah.
And I think it was one of the first movies that I cried as a young man.
Mm-hmm.
Just a solid one. And like ridiculously gory.
Yes. There are a couple scenes in that I saw it once, but to this day I know it's coming. I'm like, I'm not watching that again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Vietnam was pretty intense.
Yeah. My dad was actually born the morning that battle happened.
No way.
Yep. Was it 1964, 63, November 14th?
That's crazy.
Yep. That morning.
Man, his birthday's coming up.
It is coming up.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Separation of church and state.
Ooh.
So it's like there's this like dividing wall between you and me, right?
Yeah, almost kind of like this, kind of like what Trump's wanting to do on the border.
Yeah.
Put a dividing wall between two countries. Good idea.
Yeah. But the church and state. So why did you want to talk about this? Why is it important? Why am I here?
Yeah. Well, you're here because you're my friend.
Yeah.
I respect your opinions, and you being a pastor, I think have plenty to talk about the idea.
Yeah.
Why I wanted to talk about this topic, probably because this is one of the main issues that got me interested, got me fired up to do anything political.
Okay.
Because when you look at the truth of the founding, the intention of our founders, even the first about 150 years of the country, the concept that we have today of separation of church and state has nothing at all to do with it. It is actually antithetical. Is that the right word?
Yeah, antithetical.
Antithetical
Yeah.
to what the founders were trying to do.
It's kind of flipped on its head.
Yes, it's completely flipped on its head.
Yeah.
And we see the chaos ensuing because when you have a wrong idea of the separation of church and state, and I say wrong because there is a correct idea in there.
Right.
But when you have a wrong idea of it, which is the prevailing sentiment of our government, of the courts, of the media, of education, they're all completely 100% bought into it, with obviously caveats there, here and there. But you have nothing but chaos. When you remove God from a situation, there's a vacuum.
Yeah.
And either other people's gods and ideologies fill that vacuum or the state does.
Right.
And I think it's a mixture of all that. Ideologies, other gods, and the state have filled the vacuum that once God held that position of ultimate authority, absolute authority. And it is, when you see this has happened throughout history, it becomes a nightmare for the people.
Right.
And the fact that it hasn't as quickly here, I think is a testament to God's grace, and we don't need to take that for granted.
Yeah. But what you're not advocating for is some sort of Holy Roman Empire.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right. So we're going to go through kind of like what are the ideas, right? So what are some of these ideas that are relevant out here?
Yeah. So we're going to start with the First Amendment.
Okay.
We're just going to read the language that all of this has come from.
Can I read it? Because you're going to talk a lot.
Please do.
Yeah. Sweet. So the First Amendment states here, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Right.
That's a lot of fancy language, Joel.
Yeah, well, fun fact for you, if I'm not mistaken, the Constitution was written at a third grade level.
Wow. Our third graders are in trouble.
We're in trouble.
Yeah.
No. So, just that first part there.
Yeah.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, a lot of the prevailing ideas, the secular ideas, that this means that church and state can never touch.
Okay.
That we have freedom from religion. There's actually an organization called Freedom from Religion, and they sue even down to local governments. My hometown where I grew up got sued by this organization in court because the sheriff had a nativity scene outside the sheriff department.
Wow.
Yeah. So very hostile to anything religious. Another part of this view is that religious beliefs are private matters. You know, you worship however you want, keep it to yourself. This to them would include any beliefs and convictions held about morality, not just beliefs about salvation.
Okay.
Right. So if you have a belief on it's wrong to murder a baby in a womb,
right?
Well, that's your religious belief. Keep that out of the public sphere.
Yeah.
So you see how they twisting this to apply to all these other areas that have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so you have this.
Well, like almost every single belief or every single idea is a religious idea in a sense.
Yes.
Right.
No,
so that's why
absolutely.
I'm starting to see like there is no such thing as there's no possibility for there to be separation of church and state when you have individuals participating in a thing.
Right. Because beliefs are part of who we are.
Yeah.
And we carry who we are, our identity, into every area that we walk into, whether it's our jobs, our families, our churches, our government, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You can't just take that out.
Yeah.
You believe what you believe.
Right.
Now, how you act should show your beliefs.
Right.
But this kind of talk that we'll get into of separation of church and state from the secular mentality has shut a lot of Christians up, shut a lot of people of faith up to where their ideology now is the prevailing ideology.
Right.
And then they have the audacity to tell us ours doesn't have any standing in the public sphere.
Right. They're telling us to turn the other cheek, and we're like, oh, that's what Jesus told us to do, so I guess we'll do it.
In some senses.
But we're misinterpret that passage completely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I had an encounter when this is, probably in 2015. I was working at a fast food place that loves to sell chicken from the South, Christian chicken.
Yeah.
I'll leave people to figure out what I'm talking about here. But a coworker of mine and I were talking about that election coming up, and I was talking about how as Christians, we should be looking for people who have that at least coincide the best with biblical principles, because all men are fallen.
Yeah.
And we can't elect Jesus. Jesus is already king. He didn't step down to become a representative or a president, right?
Right.
And another coworker came up and was like, hold on, and this guy was a believer.
Yeah.
He was like, what about separation of church and state? And I was like, wow, this guy, a believer, come up through the public school system, is saying something that's not biblical.
Right.
It's not biblical. Like, even if, I'll say this, even if the Constitution and our government was set up to keep religion completely out, it's not biblical. And we as Christians would have a responsibility to fix that.
Right.
And so, yeah, it just blew my mind. We didn't end up really getting to talk about it. I wonder if he'll ever hear this podcast, and hopefully this is me finally getting to say what I was trying to say that day. Trying to say it in love.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these are just some of those prevailing ideas of what it means to separate church and state. Like Christianity, religion, and it's usually Christianity, because a lot of this multicultural relativism tries to promote other religions, but shut down Christianity.
Yeah.
Go figure. But it is this, just that idea again, that religious beliefs are private matters. Keep them out of the public square. Church and state should never touch.
Right. So, like, what's the history of that phrase, the separation of church and state? I know it kind of comes from my boy TJ.
Thomas Jefferson.
So tell me a little bit about that. Yeah,
so it came from a letter when Thomas Jefferson was elected president. The Danbury Baptist Church Association sent Thomas Jefferson a letter, basically concerned that the new Constitution, the First Amendment, actually gave the federal government power to infringe on religious beliefs. And Thomas Jefferson responded. I'll read part of that letter here. Gentlemen, skipping down, I don't know why I don't know why I did that. But this paragraph, believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions. I love that. I contemplate with sovereign reverence the act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislature, that is the U.S. Congress, should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state.
There it is.
There it is. And so the idea that Thomas Jefferson's saying is that the wall is to keep the state from preventing the church or religious belief from being free to be exercised, the freedom of exercising your religious belief.
Right.
He's saying this wall is to prevent the government from interfering with your freely exercise of your faith.
Yeah. So, I mean, that probably stems from a past of, like where they came from.
Yeah. So specifically the Baptists, they were a minority religion denomination at the time of the founding. And they were persecuted in some of the other colonies, other states that had state churches, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't fit. But now the federal Constitution is now saying they're free to exercise that religion, but it is left to the states. But the federal government's not going to stop you.
Right.
The state might have that authority, but if it does, there are other states that have religious freedom. You might want to check those out.
Right.
And that was just the idea is like, if you're not going to fit well in one, you can go to another.
Yeah.
But yeah, it came from that idea. And Thomas Jefferson championed religious liberty even in Virginia, and he got it changed to where Baptist denomination and other denominations wouldn't be persecuted, but they would be free to exercise their religion.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting because a lot of people point to Thomas Jefferson as the source, and we'll get into some of the Supreme Court cases where they actually quote Jefferson here.
Right.
Jefferson wasn't involved with the Constitution, the writing of it.
Okay.
He was in France at the time. Later in his life, a reporter tried to say that he was part of the an author of it or fundamental to it, and he corrected the reporters no, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to do with that. In fact, he didn't even like the Constitution at first.
Really?
Yes. Don't want to get into all that, but he had a lot of issues with it.
Interesting.
He felt like it gave too much power to the federal government.
Oh, I love that.
Me too.
Man, I bet if my dad listens to this, he'll be fired up about that.
So this Thomas Jefferson, who most say is very secular, and he is one of the most secular of the founding fathers.
Yeah.
But he knew how to incorporate religious themes into his writing, like the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
I love it. Not because a secularist wrote it, but because he incorporated things I agreed with.
Yeah.
But he said this later in his life. God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and that his justice cannot sleep forever.
Yeah.
He acknowledged God's authority over government.
Yeah.
And this is the guy who came up with the phrase separation of church and state.
Right.
So that should give our listeners a hint of where we're going with this, where the founders were coming from. Isn't what the modern system says separation of church and state means.
Right.
But we'll get into that as we keep going on.
Sweet. So tell me a little bit about what the Supreme Court was doing.
Yeah. So the Supreme Court for the first 150 years only used the phrase separation of church and state in 2 cases.
And it's not, separation of church and state is not in any of our legal writings.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, 2 documents that formed this country, literally formed this country, you can search till Judgment Day and you will never find the phrase separation of church and state.
So it's just in this letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote.
In that letter, yes. Yeah. And I say that it was a general statement with a correct understanding of it. It had been used in other parts of history and other writings, but not official founding documents, not official writings. In fact, to this case, the Supreme Court only used that phrase twice in 2 cases in the first 150 years of the country.
Wow.
To give you an idea that it wasn't even close to their mindset of what the First Amendment means.
Wow. All right. So how's that progressed?
Yeah. So in recent decades, the First Amendment was cited in right under 3,000 cases, while the phrase separation of church and state has been cited in over 4,000 cases, so that the courts are more likely to cite the phrase separation of church and state than they are to cite the actual clear wording of the First Amendment.
Right. So this actual document that
is the law.
That establishes our rights.
Right.
The First Amendment.
Protects our rights, doesn't establish them.
Protects our rights.
Right.
Because God gives us our rights.
That's right.
So protects our rights has only been used 3,000 or right under 3,000 times.
Mm-hmm. In recent decades.
Right. And then this phrase that Thomas Jefferson used in a letter, separation of church and state, has been used incorrectly
in over 4,000 cases.
Over 4,000 cases.
Yep. So that they're more likely to cite that than they are to the actual wordings of the Constitution in making a case in making law.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's something wrong with that.
Yes.
Right. So what has changed?
So real quick before I say what has changed, because I want to just let our listeners know, and I was going to bring this up at the end, but I just make sure I didn't forget. A lot of the information from this is coming from a book called Original Intent by David Barton. He is a Christian historian. Yep, Andrew's putting it up here for us. The book has countless quotations and footnotes tying back to original documents and original court cases. And so it's not so much the guy's opinion as it is just a compilation of founding documents, founding statements, quotes, and court cases. So it's a great resource. It's a very dry read. I'm sorry if David Barton ever listens to this, but it's a very dry read, but it's so good to just as a resource when you're wanting to know the truth behind these things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, you're the book guy today. Way to go.
Yeah. And I was like, man, I'm going to be Andrew for a minute. So I think you asked what has changed since, what's caused this change.
Yeah.
Like we see that it definitely has shifted from this
progressed,
idea.
Right.
So what has changed is the 14th Amendment.
Cool.
And I might get in trouble for talking about that just because it's controversial for a lot of people.
Well, like it was originally a very good thing.
Oh, it still is a very good thing.
Yeah, okay.
Right? It's just the way it ended up being used is not what it was originally intended for.
Okay.
Right? So the 14th Amendment, again, awesome. I love it. So good. The 14th Amendment was established after the Civil War to secure the civil rights, that is, guaranteed state privileges and citizenship of the former slaves who had been freed.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
They
Excellent.
deserve that.
And it's in the Constitution.
Yeah.
It's solid. It is the law of the land.
Yeah.
Love this. So here's where things get dicey.
Okay.
In Everson v. Board of Education, which I believe was a case in 1947. Wait, I'm going to double check that because I want to make sure I say that right. Yes, 1947. We'll look at that case in a minute. The U.S. Supreme Court forced the 14th Amendment to make religious expression a federal issue.
Okay.
And so what they basically did, they took the First Amendment and the rest of the Bill of Rights didn't apply to the states. It applied only to the federal government. It was a prohibition on the federal government's power saying you shall not pass.
Okay.
The Supreme Court took the wording of the 14th Amendment, which was to give citizenship and protect their rights and liberties in the states. They took that 14th Amendment and they said, actually, this also means that the federal government now has authority over the First Amendment.
Interesting.
Over the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Over the rest of those amendments. Like that's now a federal government has power. Instead of it preventing the federal government from Congress, because we read that Congress shall make no law.
Right.
Now they're saying states shall make no law.
Okay.
So they changed the wording, added wording to the Constitution without an amendment.
Okay. It's a big no-no.
That's a huge no-no.
Yeah.
And it should infuriate everybody.
It's unconstitutional.
Right. And it takes away from the beauty and the meaning of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah. And
so going on from there, Congress and the Supreme Court both originally rejected this use of the 14th Amendment. So it's not like it's always meant that way. Like Everson v. Board of Education, when the Supreme Court ruled and changed it, it's not like they had done that since the 14th Amendment. In fact, the 14th Amendment in 1876, 8 years after the 14th Amendment was ratified, and after two Supreme Court cases on this amendment already, this was said that the rule adopted by the Supreme Court of the United States in interpreting the 14th Amendment makes it inapplicable to the religious liberty or any other right of the citizen as determined by the state by which he is a resident. So I know it's kind of wordy, but what he's saying there is in these past two cases, the Supreme Court never let the 14th Amendment apply to the First Amendment.
Okay.
Right. So he's saying they never even
So they broke precedent.
Oh, they absolutely broke precedent in Everson v. Board of Education.
Okay.
This guy goes on, there's nothing in the last three amendments, the 14th being one of them, to the Constitution that reaches the question of religion, and nothing anywhere else in this instrument that places the states under the slightest restraint with reference to this subject. So meaning nothing in those amendments changed the Constitution, nothing in them changed the way the states had authority over this subject.
Yeah.
All right. And hence it is true, as remarked by Justice Story, who is one of the Supreme Court's most noted legal scholars. He was appointed by President James Madison. So Justice Story, as noted in his remarks in his commentaries on the Constitution, that the whole power over the subject of religion is left exclusively to the state governments to be acted upon according to their sense of justice and the state constitutions.
Okay. Quick question. This is a little bit off base, but I'm going to forget it.
Yeah.
Were states allowed to create a state religion?
Yes.
Okay, but not the federal government was not.
Federal government was not.
Okay.
So that's a key thing, because this also goes back to the idea of federal government.
Right.
The Constitution, it was a limited document, and it united the 13 states.
Right.
So that's what it did. It created a country of 13 individual countries.
Right.
But it only ever had power to act for the benefit or on behalf of all 13.
Okay.
Right? So it was a unifying document, and they said, all right, in Article 1, Section 8, 18 powers were given to the federal government.
Okay.
And you could say there were a few powers, like laying out the power of the judiciary, laying out the power of the executive.
Sure.
But those powers were to do those 18 things.
Okay.
Right? So it is federal, that was it. That was for the government to function on behalf of all the rest of the states.
Right.
Everything else stayed with the states because they viewed themselves as sovereign countries that decided to unite together under and by the Constitution, but only under those 18 powers.
Yeah.
Everything else belonged to them. That's the idea of federal, shared power. That's what federal means.
So did this 14th Amendment interpretation disallow states from creating a state-sponsored denomination or religion?
Right. So a complete reversal of the way the system the founders set up.
Wow. Okay.
They literally took something that belonged to the states and said, nope, that's the federal government now. They centralized power, whereas the founders created a decentralized system.
Okay.
Which is much better for the security of the rights and liberty of the people.
Right.
So yeah, that's a great question.
We always, anytime the federal government takes power, they never give it back.
Never give it back.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, it's just a law of evil.
Yeah.
Evil gets more evil.
Yeah. Even if its intention wasn't evil.
No, right.
It's
many of these people had great intentions, I'm sure.
Right.
They were just based in things that weren't true, and ended up becoming, as we can see in our own culture, they are destructive of truth and right and goodness. So, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that.
Sweet.
So, moving on just to what those actual cases talked about.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 1947, court ruling, Everson v. Board of Education. Good grief, I cannot speak tonight.
You. Everson v. Board. Just call
Education.
it that.
There you go. See, I always said versus, but apparently that's not correct legal jargon. So
it's not like a sports game.
Yeah. So this is 1947.
Okay.
This is where that phrase first gets used. This is where they federalize the First Amendment, and the rest of those Bill of Rights give power to the federal government. This is where it comes. This is what it says. The Supreme Court ruled in that case that the First Amendment has erected a wall between church and state. That wall must be kept high and impregnable. We could not approve the slightest breach. The Supreme Court federalized the states in this case and others, which subjected the states to the restrictions of the U.S. Constitution that originally only applied to the federal government.
Wow.
Complete power grab by the Supreme Court in that situation.
Huh.
So, and again, it takes away from the beauty and the correct understanding of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
Because that was to give recognition that the freed slaves are now citizens. They're now your equals.
Right.
And now we have this issue.
Okay.
And then that led to 1963, which is in my opinion, very infamous year.
Okay. So tell me what happened in 1963.
Yeah. Well, a lot of stuff. But what we're going to talk about.
What, did Bob Dylan release a bad record or something?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But a Supreme Court case happened, and it was School District of Abington Township v.
Shemp.
Sure. In this case, it's a legal case in which the U.S. Supreme Court on June 17th, 1963 ruled 8-1, which is crazy, that legally or officially mandated Bible reading and or prayer in public schools is unconstitutional.
Okay.
Again, the states had the authority before that 1947 ruling to do this type of thing.
Yeah.
And if the people of the state were, by and large, were a bunch of Christians, we don't really want them like trying to evangelize, but we see that the Bible being read is a good idea, and most of our students should have times of praying, and these are these parents wanting this for their kids. Okay, our state's going to acknowledge that. We're going to have this time of reading the Bible and praying.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court says, nope, that's unconstitutional. But the federal government originally never had that authority.
So the federal government passed that for California and Georgia.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's probably the big problem.
It is.
Right. And that's that Georgia, if Georgia wanted to have that, should be able to choose if they wanted to have it or not. It took everything from, this is the same problem that we're having with Roe v. Wade, right?
Yes. Yes. That is part of, because the 14th Amendment has federalized the Bill of Rights. That is part of the issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm just now kind of semi-agreeing with this idea, but I still also agree that I kind of agree with the Supreme Court decision that mandated Bible reading and prayer is unconstitutional.
So think about it this way. We live in the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
Let's say Georgia had mandated Bible reading and praying.
Yeah.
And we, being faithful Christians, at least by the grace of God, the best of our ability, we're like, it shouldn't be mandated. We do like the idea.
Yeah.
So let's, in the state of Georgia, which is much easier to deal with.
Yeah.
Let's go, hey, it's not mandated. The time to have prayer and Bible, that's mandated.
Yeah.
But students don't have to do it.
Yeah.
In the sense of, you're not going to be forced, but you're not going to be prohibited from having this time.
Right.
Well, it's so much easier to do that in the state of Georgia because we recognize, well, you can't force somebody to accept Christ. And that's not what these states were necessarily doing. They were just saying, we're going to take time to read the Bible. Okay. So you can do that locally. Yeah. That's a local issue. You know your neighbors, you know your school board, you can deal with this.
Right.
But now the federal government's going, nope, everybody across the board, you're not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And takes the power of the people away from them, takes the power of the states, centralizes it, and now you have a handful of people who may become very irreligious or anti-irreligious, go figure, who want no religion and try to crush religion, or they start promoting other religions that are completely antithetical to what we would believe.
Right. No, so like that's the interesting thing. Is like, so we can take the mandate for biblical understanding out, but we can put in sex education that we are completely opposed to.
Which is exactly what has happened.
And that's exactly what has happened, right? And because of a Department of Education that, can go, depending on the times, is either conservative or liberal.
Right.
Right now, it seems like it's going in more liberal direction.
Oh, yes. Very woke.
So, like, if it just keeps going that direction, it's gonna be doing things that we, as conservative folks, don't necessarily want mandated in our schools.
Right.
And we don't want the power to ever be so centralized that if I'm in power, I get to do whatever I want.
Right.
And when my enemy is in power, they get to do whatever they want.
Right. We don't, and honestly, the centralization of power is what is, and I believe, one of the main factors causing the polarization in the country.
Yeah.
Because if everybody goes, oh, that area, that little section, DC, federal government, Congress, that's what decides everything. Oh, well then, oh my gosh, we have to control that, or the country's falling, or we're going to lose our democracy. We hear that all the time. Versus if it was 50 states, you having your own republics and you getting to decide in your state how things go. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So much more peaceful, so much more able to have actual discussions and let things settle. And we in Georgia like it this way, so we're going to have it this way. California, not going to like it the way we like it. But hey, those people are those people.
Right.
Right?
So I think we've devolved a little bit from separation of church and state to the centralization of power.
Yes, we have a little bit.
I didn't mean to go that way.
But it's important to talk about, so it's okay.
Yeah. So let's move down to we talked about Shemp. So
Yep.
what is the original meaning or intention that the founders had for religion in public life or in politics?
Yeah, so I have a couple quotes that I had pulled up. We're not going to read them all because time and the wording is older English, not old English, but older English, and can get a lot. So one of the first things, though, I want to touch on and just mention these. John Hancock had a proclamation on March 5th of 1774, where he basically called the people to, and he was the governor. I believe he was the governor of Massachusetts. No, he wasn't. He was not the governor of Massachusetts at that time. He ended up becoming governor later on. Okay. But he was a leader. This proclamation is just this call to turn to God, to repent of sin, and because all these crazy evil things were going on, all this oppression, let's turn to God and ask for his aid. This is coming from a governing official asking people to pray, seek God, repent, turn to him. Let's ask him to turn away the crisis that we're having. Yeah. Right? And then another one in November 1st, 1777, the U.S. Congress, the Continental Congress, because I don't think it was called U.S. Congress at the time, but the Continental Congress during the War for Independence had a day of Thanksgiving called, where they proclaimed and asked for everybody to go into their churches and give thanks to God, because I think this was after Saratoga. Okay. So a great victory. Cool. So go and thank God for this victory, for delivering us. Wow. Right?
Yeah. So just like over and over again, people that were in the public eye who are practicing their personal faith in the public eye, calling others who practice that personal faith also
to do the same,
to go and practice their faith.
Right.
And it was okay for them to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they would have been unheard of to not have done it. Okay. Yeah. It would have just been crazy. And then another day of Thanksgiving, Congress on October 24th, 1781, after the victory at Yorktown. So this is the end of the war. Okay. They resolved that the day after, they were all going to go to church and spend the day thanking God for the victory over Lord Cornwallis. Yeah.
I mean, not a mandate.
No.
Right.
But then that wasn't to the rest of the country. That was saying, hey, Congress, the federal government, continental government. Yeah. We're going to go as a body. We're going to go and give thanks to God for this. Cool. Which is just incredible. Here is one I did want to read. This was George Washington on June 8th, 1783. He sent a circular letter to the governors of all the states, and this is what he said. I now make it my earnest prayer that God would have you and the state over which you preside in his holy protection, that he would most graciously be pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with the charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind, which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion, aka Jesus Christ, without which a humble imitation whose example in these things we can never hope to be a happy nation. Yeah. To the governors, he's encouraging them that you would seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God, and that you would seek to imitate Jesus Christ.
Right. So he's quoting scripture.
Yep.
He's kind of pastoring them a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
The president towards the governors.
Yeah. He is not. Is he president?
1783?
No, he's not president yet.
Not yet? Wow.
No.
Okay. Cool.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna die I'm gonna have to double check this. I'm checking this. I'm so sorry, y'all, because when
this just in, George Washington. This is breaking news right now.
First one comes up. When was he born? So when was he president? I was right. So 1789 to 1797. So he was not president at this time.
Cool.
But he was still
a leader, a general.
Well, he was the general that won the war.
Right.
And so they all respected his opinion. Yeah. So yeah, like you said, he's pastoring them. He's telling them, hey, here's what your call is. Yeah. Even as a governor.
Right.
That's a proper influence of religious faith onto government.
Yeah.
Right?
That's great. You've got another one here from Ben Franklin. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. It's long.
It is very long, so I'm not going to talk about it all, but I am going to just give a little context and I'll read part of this. Okay. So Benjamin Franklin is often known as a deist.
Right.
And I think he was at the beginning of his life. But as this quote will show, he was not a deist, at least at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever came to accept Christ as Lord and Savior, as God. He had a tremendous amount of respect for Christ. He did believe in God, but he had trouble seeing that Jesus was God.
Yeah.
Right? But this is in the Constitutional Convention. This is where the Constitution was being written and where they were trying to figure out how to do it. They were at a deadlock. There were talks of the delegates going home. I think some of them actually did go home, and they were about to fall apart, and it was all of it. And just to think about the severity of this, if that federal constitution had not been written and then offered to the states for ratification, the states would have fragmented.
Right.
And I think other empires and countries would have come and taken them over.
Right. Yeah, like Spain,
France, England, all of them would have come back. Right.
Yeah.
So super dangerous moment for our country. And they're in there arguing and bickering, and Benjamin Franklin stands up, asks the president if he can speak, the president of the Congress, not the president, because there isn't a president yet, which is George Washington. And so he basically goes, how have we forgotten to ask God? How have we forgotten to pray and seek his guidance? Because during the war, we sought him every day in here. And then this is where I'm going to pick up. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us who were engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor, meaning God stepped in for us. Right. To that kind providence, we owe this happy opportunity of consulting in peace on the means of establishing our future national felicity. Yeah. So we can peacefully figure out how to be a happy country one day. And we have now, and here's this question, and have we now forgotten that powerful friend? I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this. And he goes on, makes a motion that they have prayer in Congress every day from then on. Somebody seconds it, but they were like, we can't afford to pay for somebody. So what they do instead is they all adjourn for a day and they all go spend the next day in a church praying and seeking God for his help. Wow. And a few weeks later, we had the U.S. Constitution.
Very cool.
Yeah.
My wife has had many moments where like we're kind of, we don't really like fight, but there was a moment where like we were kind of getting back and forth. She goes, we're not really getting along right now. And she basically had a Benjamin Franklin moment. It's like, we need to pray. Yeah. And we prayed, and then we it was actually on a budget night, and we created a budget for our family.
And peace.
And
right?
Peace.
Right?
Yeah.
Peace happens. And think about that. God answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
God answered them.
Yeah.
And so talking about your question, how did the founding fathers view religion and state? These examples.
They practiced their personal faith in public life. Right.
The free exercise of religion in public life.
Yeah.
That's what they understood. That's what they did. So the last bit I'm going to touch on this is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This was written by the same Congress that wrote and approved the wording of the First Amendment. And they said, this is Article 3, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged.
Right. This is kind of the whole idea that I remember you talking about with Cam in one of your first episodes was like that this government is meant for good and moral people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Can you explain or expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's a quote from John Adams, and he was addressing, I believe, the Army at the time.
Okay.
And he was telling them, we have this great Constitution, but it'll only work if the people are moral and religious.
Yeah.
Because they understood, and George Washington even said this in his farewell address, that we're fooling ourselves if we think morality can exist without religion.
Yeah.
And so this was their idea of where the Northwest Ordinance is. These are the laws that are going to govern this new territory that just opened up to us after we beat Britain, which another part of that was that it was going to be free states. There was going to be no slavery there.
Right.
But this was a huge piece of this, of religion. They acknowledged that religion has to be involved in good government. And to do that, we're going to have education for religion, morality, and knowledge so that we have good government. So these are the people that wrote it. And they're like, no, we have to promote and have this going on in our country, or we will not have good government, and you guys are going to end up oppressed.
And it's the free exercise of religion.
Yes.
Right? So it's someone individually exercising their religion, right?
Yes.
It's not the state forcing a religion on you that you must practice.
Right.
It is a free expression of your religion, and namely a religion based off of Judeo-Christian values.
Yes.
Yeah.
So during the time of the founding, there were Jewish sections, but they were so minimum.
Yeah.
I think that there were some Muslims that had come here, but it was extremely, extremely minimum, almost non-existent.
Yeah. Probably only like slaves.
Maybe it's hard because Islam, that would be hard to say. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be really hard to say. But anyways, Christianity was what they were referring to in all this. No particular denomination, just the free exercise.
That word was interchangeable.
Yes.
Religion and denomination.
Yes. That was their understanding.
Yeah.
They were not opposed to letting Jews and Muslims freely exercise their religion, in so much as it didn't cause harm to other individuals. And same for Christians. And we're not going to get into those Supreme Court cases, but that was acknowledged as like, no, you have the freedom to exercise religion as long as you're not, like, I don't know, sacrificing children.
Right.
Like that sounds disgusting, but they're like, no. The state has a responsibility to step in and protect the children in that situation.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to exercise religion that hurts somebody like that.
Right.
And hurting, it means physical harm, not emotional harm, because that would be something today. People say, oh, I'm emotionally harmed by this guy evangelizing. No, you're not.
Right. That's called conviction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, you got there before I did. So yes, that's where it's at. This is what our founders understood it to be.
Yeah. All right. So, tell me a little bit about this Church of the Holy Trinity versus the United States, 1892.
So just going into some of the Supreme Court cases that kind of, it's not just their opinions. These are actual court cases, common law established. This is the way it is, right? Church of the Holy Trinity versus United States was 1892. Excuse me. So this case had to do with a church that was trying to hire a minister from England, but there was a law, a federal law prohibiting the hiring of foreign labor at the time.
Interesting.
Right. It is interesting. And the reason it was is because, especially in the big cities, they were hiring this foreign labor. It was almost slave-like labor.
Right.
They were giving them terrible jobs and such. So the law was to
sounds familiar,
right? The law was to protect people from being hired and treated badly, not to stop a minister or an actual like professional. Like you're going to pay him justly. Okay. So the Supreme Court would basically, you're getting away from the spirit of the law. So you can't stop this minister, this church from hiring this minister from England. And then the court then spent the remainder of the case explaining that it would be completely repugnant to the spirit of the Constitution to in any way hinder, whether directly or indirectly, the spread or propagation or the proclamation of Christianity by legislative act. As the court noted, no purpose of action against religion can be imputed to any legislation, state or national, because this is a religious people. This is a Christian nation.
Cool. So, it's common law. It's written by, these are judges.
Okay. So common law is a really unique thing.
Okay.
It comes back from ancient England.
Okay.
Like think Middle Ages England, and even further back from the Saxons.
Okay.
So Common law is the body of law that comes through court cases, that comes through law, legislation passed. It's all of it. This is the law. And I think there are a few other aspects to it. So if a listener wants to drop a comment, I'd love to look at it and maybe address it in another one. But so common law, it is coming through courts, a part of it, right?
Yeah.
So they talk about common law being it's the bedrock. It's what the founders adopted as our system of law. It's like we have the Constitution, but we have all this other precedent from all these other court cases. We're not just going to throw that out because we're a new nation now.
Yeah.
Right. So common law, every state runs by common law except Louisiana.
Interesting.
Yes. Louisiana runs by, what is it called?
Shrimp.
Shrimp and grits. There we go. No, there's a different system of law that comes from France.
I was going to say it was probably some French word.
It was.
Yeah.
But it's not too different. So it's not like it's having issues with the rest of the states, but it is a completely different
cool.
system.
It gets to operate a little bit differently.
Right.
Don't we like that?
We do love that.
Decentralized.
I love that. I don't like that system of law, but I love that they have the power to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
So it's common law that somebody said that we are a Christian nation.
Yes.
Can we talk about what that means and what that doesn't mean?
Yes. Okay. So, just to clarify what they're saying in that case real quick, and then I'll get into like what they are and are not saying. They're basically saying that the Constitution, you would be violating the Constitution to prevent the states from passing laws that promote Christianity.
Okay.
Right? So completely 180 from where we are today.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite. They're saying no law can in any way promote Christianity, or let alone any other religion.
That's what they're saying today.
That's what they're saying today. Then they were saying, no, it would be against the Constitution if you prevented this laws from passing to promote Christianity.
Right.
Which just blows my mind. Completely blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because the justices who say it today should know about this.
In 1892.
They know better.
Yeah.
Because they have to know these cases.
Yeah.
That's what common law means. You look back to see what was happening before, and we look for precedents. And we look for, how did these courts do it? How did these do it? Okay, well, they were wrong, but this was good.
Right.
Right? Roe v. Wade is a perfect case of where they're like, hey, they were wrong in how they did this.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
because they denied precedent.
Yes.
To
get
change this.
And they try to say, well, now there's this new precedent. Like, no, you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
New precedent is like an oxymoron.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So what they're saying with we are a Christian nation, what they're saying is that as the body of government, they are not, I think I want to go back a little further. The idea that God establishes all institutions. He establishes the family, the church, education, even entertainment, government, all institutions, whatever they are. God establishes them all.
Yeah.
And we'll get into some scriptures towards the end of this.
Catechism that we do for our son is, what is God? And he's the creator and sustainer of everything.
Of everything, meaning all institutions.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a sphere of authority that God places on each institution.
Sphere of authority?
Sphere of authority.
Okay.
So the family has a sphere of authority. The head of the household has responsibility to protect, provide, and raise his children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, right? And to love his wife and give himself for her. Those types of things.
Yeah.
The government's not supposed to do that for him.
Okay.
Right? Church has a sphere of authority to evangelize and promote the gospel of Jesus Christ and proclaim it and to further the kingdom of God on earth.
Yeah. To care for the poor.
To care for the poor and needy.
Yeah.
Right? That's the church's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
State has the jurisdiction of punishing criminals, promoting truth, righteousness, equity, justice, administering justice,
Yeah.
protecting the rights and liberty of the people. And there's more to it, but that's essentially that.
Yeah.
Those are the core elements of what the government is supposed to do. That's
Right.
its sphere of authority.
If the church were to get involved in justice, it'd be off.
It'd be very off.
Right? Like, and if the state were to get involved in evangelism, it would be off.
It would be very off.
Right. And so I think there's like, we have to recognize that.
Yes.
Right?
And I'm glad you said it that way, because think back, and what I'm about to say, I mean, no offense if it comes out the wrong way to any of our Catholic friends.
Yeah.
But ancient to medieval Catholicism, where the church got involved in the states, and the church started trying to administer justice and at the same time trying to evangelize, and it just became this conglomerated mess of mixing the spheres of authority.
Right.
And it caused a lot of chaos.
Well, when you consolidate power
yeah.
into a religious institution, power corrupts. My dad
Yes.
always says this: absolute power
Lord
corrupts absolutely. Right.
Which is cool, because he was a Catholic who said that.
So yeah, way to go, guys.
Yeah.
So like, that is a terrible thing to try to give to people that their goal is to serve. Right. My goal as a pastor, it's not that a pastor doesn't have authority in the church. Not at all.
Right.
The pastor's role in the church is to serve.
Right.
Right? Who has authority in the church? Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Of Nazareth.
Amen.
Right? So, and I submit to the scriptures, and then I serve our body.
Right.
Right? And so that's different than the role of the state.
Yes.
Right?
Right. So the state has a role from God
Yeah.
that it's supposed to submit to. So the understanding at the time when they said we are a Christian nation, they're not saying we're a theocracy. They hated the idea of a theocracy.
Right.
Right. You can go read a lot of stuff like, no theocracy. What they're saying with that is, as a government, as an institution of the government, we're acknowledging the lordship of Christ over even this institution.
Yeah.
As all other institution, he is Lord. But this one, we're acknowledging his lordship. We're acknowledging he has a mandate for how government's supposed to function within the scriptures. Not the hard and fast rules, not the Levitical laws. They weren't trying to implement the Levitical laws. They weren't trying to even implement the laws given to the church in the New Testament.
Right.
But what they were doing is looking at the whole of Scripture. And if people want to be like, no, they weren't. Well, they all were basing their laws and their theories of law on a guy named Blackstone. And this is the way he did it, is that the principles found in Scripture have to be the foundation of our laws, or they're not just.
And they weren't perfect, right? Like, we can acknowledge
Yes,
that.
please.
Right.
They were not perfect. Slavery existed, unfortunately, for way too long.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of people were trying to fix it, trying to find peaceful ways to fix it, it still was way too long.
Yeah.
Not perfect. But they're saying we're a Christian nation in the sense of we're going to submit to the way God is showing us in Scripture, the way government's supposed to to function.
Created the pathways for things to be a more perfect union.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, these are the pathways for that. Thank you for saying that. So yeah, we're not saying theocracy, we're not saying Christian nation, we're not saying we're trying to, the state has no place in imposing, again, the Levitical law or the laws given to the church. But what it does have is the responsibility to administer righteousness and justice and equity and goodness and truth, and to promote that and protect the rights and liberty of the people. That's its sphere under God. Go do it. Christians, you need to influence, that way they stay within their sphere and function the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, and we don't, and so I think I keep saying this thing, is like the individual must come into the public square with their belief system.
Yes, absolutely.
And they can't abandon their belief system. So like a senator who goes onto Capitol Hill and is trying to promote justice for a particular group of people.
Yep.
If he abandons his values, he's not going to be able to be just.
Right, and he's not. What standard is he going to have to measure by whether he's being just or not?
Right.
And that's the issue when, since God has been removed from our public square, since the secularists now say that our Christian beliefs that, like you were just saying, that we would want to carry in and be an influence, that's not legitimate. That's crossing the line of separation of church and state. You can't do that. You can't freely exercise your religion except in private matters, not public. Stay away.
Right.
Completely, as we just read in that case, completely against what not only the founders, but the Supreme Court later on for over 150 years was saying, no, this is the way it is. Like what we were just discussing a moment ago.
Yeah. That was It's always been the goal. And like,
Yep.
I wouldn't want somebody who disagrees with me in their values to abandon their faith to come in, right?
Exactly.
This is, there's a whole idea. The best idea has to win.
Yes. So think about this.
Yeah.
And this is why in saying they're a Christian nation, we're submitting to Christ. Like that's an official statement from the federal government.
Right.
No other religion, no other ideology, no other philosophy protects the religious liberty of the minority.
Right.
Christianity does, though.
Yeah.
Christianity acknowledges government. You don't get to crush religions. You administer this according to the principles laid out in the Word of God.
Right.
The Bible. Church, you better promote this because it's the biblical worldview that ensures all the other people get to maintain their right of conscience before God, that they're going to worship God as the dictates of their conscience would have them do.
Right.
Only Christianity, only that biblical worldview does that. All other Christianities crush that.
Yeah.
Crush that system of religious liberty for everyone.
Right. I mean, that's what you see. You see that with Sharia law. Like, it's not safe.
Yes.
To practice another religion in those kind of countries.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And then in communism, you force out any kind of God for the sake of the government to be your God. And those are just as much theocracies, or more so theocracies. They're just secular or false theocracies.
Yes, because when you remove God, again, who becomes God? The state.
Right.
They're false theocracies. They're more theocracies than anything the founders saying this kind of stuff was.
Right.
Or anything the Bible would ever want to have.
Yeah, the Bible doesn't advocate for a theocracy.
No,
right.
it doesn't. As
some friends of ours.
Yes, yes. So I'm not going to go into the next case. We're going to skip this one, but I do want to just mention it for our listeners. If you want to look it up, the next one we were going to look at was Updegraff v. Commonwealth. So I recommend that because it's reiterating the same principle. This was before the federal government, the 14th Amendment was federalized. Okay. So it's the same thing. We are a Christian nation. They defended it multiple times. It's not just once. And then United States v. McIntosh in 1931, which is right before the New Deal and the Supreme Court completely flipped on all these presidents.
Cool.
This was like the last time they were like said this case was like, it was a hybrid. They were like saying, oh, there's a separation, but we are Christian people according to one another, the equal right of religious freedom and acknowledging with reverence the duty of obedience to the will of God. Cool. That was the last time the court did that. Wow. After that, it completely changed everything. Man. So 1931, maybe the last good ruling from the Supreme, not the last good ruling.
We've had a couple good. We've had a couple wins.
We just had one last year.
Yeah.
Or 2 years
couple years ago. It's been a minute, dude.
Oh gosh, it has, hasn't it?
It rolls fast. Yeah. So are you feeling good? Like you want to keep rolling, or do you want to?
I think this is a good time. We can go ahead and let me take a look where we're at with our time. Yeah, I think this will be a good time that we can take a break and come back here in just a minute. Well, for our listeners, you be coming back in about a week.
About a week.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, this has been great so far. I cannot wait to get to the next part, and I hope you guys will stick around for that because we're going to look at what the Bible says about this concept of separating church and state, and then get into actually defining what does that actually mean.
Awesome.
So yeah, looking forward to it. So
cool. Thank you
again. Yeah, man. Thanks, guys. God bless. Thank you for listening to the Free Man's Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe for more great episodes coming your way soon. For more information and to sign up for exclusive bonus content, you can visit our website, thefreemanspodcast.com. Thanks again for listening, and God bless y'all.